I read the original Ultimate Spider-Man in 2024. Does this revolutionary comic from almost 25 years ago still hold up? Let's talk about it. Ultimate Spider-Man from 2000 continues to be one of the most recommended Spider-Man titles for anyone wanting to get started reading Spider-Man comics. If you look up basically this exact search and you click on a Reddit thread or any sort of forum, most of them will tell you that the best place to start reading Spider-Man comics is the Ultimate Spider-Man run from the year 2000. I'm a pretty big Spider-Man fan myself, yet I haven't actually read this run of Spider-Man comics which continues to be so revered. My current favorite Spider-Man comic is Spider-Man Life Story, but after reading Ultimate Spider-Man, I will say I am really loving how it's going so far, and I hope to be able to finish the series in the near future. This comic book clearly inspired both the Raimi trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man duology, and it's really cool to see how this comic book has influenced such iconic movies. The reason I picked up Ultimate Spider-Man this year is because I'm really loving the new Ultimate Spider-Man from this year, 2024. It's an incredible new direction for the character and a fantastic jumping on point for anyone that's new. And because I'm really loving this one, but obviously there's only one comic per month, I wanted to try something new that I've heard is super iconic. So let's get into Ultimate Spider-Man. So this video will spoil the first 7 issues or so of Ultimate Spider-Man. However, it's essentially just Amazing Fantasy 15 with some little twists here and there. So I'm realistically not going to be spoiling a lot for you. But before we start, if you guys could please like and subscribe, that would really help me out, really helps grow the channel, and I really appreciate it. With that being said, let's get into it. Starting off with issue number 1, this is already clearly a very different story than has ever been told in Spider-Man comics. The first 7 issues cover his origin, which is already in stark contrast to Amazing Fantasy 15. Amazing Fantasy 15 is less than even a full comic book, and so the fact that Ultimate Spider-Man takes its time to really drag out his origin is a very unique and interesting take on Spider-Man's origin. I really enjoy slow-paced comic books. I'm a big fan of Invincible as well, and so the slower form of storytelling is very compelling to me. This comic already takes so much time to establish the characters and establish the setting as well as the relationships between the characters. Because this comic takes so long to really establish the characters, I really felt myself loving all of the characters and especially Uncle Ben. And I felt like I almost didn't want him to die, even though obviously it's an important part of Spider-Man's origin. I still felt like I was wanting him to hang around for a little bit longer, but I knew it ultimately had to happen. He was such an amazing character, and I just really didn't want him to leave yet. Uncle Ben dies in issue number 4 of Ultimate Spider-Man, and that is actually one of my favorite issues of Spider-Man comic books that I have ever read. The most important moment in the comic book itself is the moment when he tells Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. However, he doesn't just tell him that. He elaborates on the phrase very similarly to the way that Uncle Ben does in the Amazing Spider-Man movies.
But your father lived by a philosophy, a principle really. He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
Which made me really, really love this issue. I love the fact that the phrase "with great power comes great responsibility" is expanded upon, because in Amazing Fantasy 15, it is just a short little kind of blurb at the very end of the comic. I love the fact that it's been expanded upon to this length, that he explains the philosophy of it, and it's really just a really beautiful moment in that comic before Uncle Ben's eventual death. The writing also heavily shows Peter's kind of immaturity and stubbornness at times, but they do it in kind of a quirky manner that doesn't make him unlikable as a character. That I think is a really good thing, because if you make Peter too much of a jerk, then we won't like him. But I think he needs a little bit of that snarkiness in order for us to relate to him as a character. So I think that the portrayal of Spider-Man and Peter Parker in this version is very relatable and very faithful to the original. Talking about the main antagonist from these first few issues, Green Goblin is actually heavily altered from his typical comic book look. He's massive, he's very monstrous and kind of demonic looking. He's far less of a man than most other Green Goblin versions are, and he's very much a beast and a monster. He's probably like, I don't even know, maybe close to 15 feet tall, maybe 20 feet, I'm not exactly sure. He is far larger than the average human, which makes his presence felt way more than typical Green Goblin, for me personally anyway. Except for Willem Dafoe's, but we're not talking about the movies right now. Green Goblin's origin is also very interesting in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. In this version, he blows up his house, kills his wife, and basically tries to hunt down his son, which makes him just feel like a truly terrifying villain. He really feels very formidable, and they set him up to be Spidey's main antagonist in the series, and I really love the way that it's done in this series. Now talking a little bit about Mark Bagley's art. I'm actually a really big fan of Mark Bagley's art. I know some people have said he's fallen off a little bit in, present day with some of his covers, but I think that especially in this original Ultimate Spider-Man series, it is fantastic artwork. Some of my favorite from any Spider-Man comic. His artwork feels very contemporary, yet it was still done almost 25 years ago. The suit itself has massive lenses, and it looks modern, but yet has a very classic flair to it. It's very hard, in my opinion, to screw up the classic Spider-Man suit, and Mark Bagley simply improves upon it. I really like the way that Bagley kind of draws the dynamic shots with Spider-Man when he's swinging around, because he'll draw multiple versions to simulate the movement. But the version of Spider-Man that we're supposed to focus on is fully rendered with the webbing, and the ones that are meant to simulate movement do not have the webbing, which creates a really neat focal point for when Spidey's swinging or jumping and leaping off things. Let's talk a little bit about a comparison between the two of these comics. While obviously they don't have a very similar storyline, with the new Ultimate Spider-Man being about older Peter Parker, it's really cool to see how similar of an impact they're having on the comic book industry. Both of these comics were received very well when they first came out, and I think that both of them will continue to stand the test of time because they are simply good stories. They're not super connected with other comics, and there's not a lot of homework that you have to do. They're just connected to their specific Ultimate Universe. So if you're curious about a certain event or another character that shows up, you can just go read that Ultimate comic. You don't have to read Doctor Strange Annual or whatever to find out what happens in Ultimate Spider-Man. You may have to for The Amazing Spider-Man, but the really cool thing about the Ultimate Universe is just how self-contained it really is. If you want to know more about the universe itself, you just have to go read the other titles from the Ultimate series, which in my opinion really simplifies and streamlines the reading process and makes me want to go and read other things so I can understand the universe better. But anyway, mini rant aside, let's finish talking about Ultimate Spider-Man. So, is this comic still the best jumping on point for anyone wanting to get started reading Spider-Man comics? I think so. I would recommend either this Ultimate Spider-Man comic or the new Ultimate Spider-Man comic from 2024. The only reason I would be more inclined to recommend the original is because it does tell more of a classic Peter Parker story, whereas the new one tells more of a story of Peter Parker having to deal with already having a family when he gets his Spider-Man powers. That being said, I think they are both fantastic takes on the character, and if you have not read the original Ultimate Spider-Man, I highly, highly recommend that you pick it up because, in my opinion, it is very much worth reading. It's a fantastic story, and it's really engaging and entertaining, at least in my opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. It would be very much appreciated, and it helps me grow the channel, and it also helps me make better content for you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.